When I was 8 years old, I had a dream I would never forget for the rest of my life. In that dream, the sky was pitch black, thick clouds churning layer upon layer. Suspended in midair was a colossal dragon, tightly bound by chains. Its massive body was covered in deep cracks, as if it were on the verge of shattering. The dragon turned its head toward me, and in its eyes was an indescribable despair. It opened its mouth as though trying to beg for help. But at that very moment, its head was suddenly severed from its body, plunging into an endless abyss. A dense stream of black smoke shot straight toward me. I jolted awake. My entire body burned as if on fire, my heart pounding wildly. I had barely stepped out of bed to change my clothes when my vision went black, and I collapsed. My parents panicked and rushed me to hospitals of every level, from local clinics to provincial medical centers. Every diagnosis came back the same. Nothing was wrong. Only my grandfather, an elderly fortune teller in the village, stared at me for a long time before his expression turned grave. "This child is missing a soul." He said that one of my 3 souls and 7 spirits was gone, likely taken after colliding with something evil, steeped in resentment. That very night, he wrapped my body with ink-soaked string, gathered incense, candles, and spirit money, and took me to the crossroads at the entrance of the village to perform a soul-summoning ritual. I don't remember the ceremony itself. I only know that when I woke up the next morning, the illness had miraculously vanished. But from that day on, my life took a completely different path. After the soul-summoning ritual, I could no longer remember anything from before the age of 8. I didn't remember my relatives. I didn't remember my friends. I couldn't even remember my own name. I knew I lived with my grandparents and parents, yet every sense of familiarity had disappeared. Even stranger, I began to change. From a child who struggled in school, I became someone abnormal. Whatever I studied, I remembered. Whatever I saw once, I understood. My grandfather began teaching me things that could never be found in books: physiognomy, reading aura, geomancy, warding off evil, and fate itself. 10 years passed, and I had nearly mastered everything he knew, until the day I graduated from high school. Holding my university acceptance letter, I ran home in excitement. My grandfather only looked at me for a long moment, then shook his head. "You can't go to college." Not only that, he said I could no longer stay in this house. He offered no explanation. He only left behind a letter and told me to open it 3 days later. On the day he left, I watched his hunched figure disappear into the distance, a clear feeling rising in my heart. This time he would never return. 3 days later, I opened the letter. It read, "Lee-er, I've already gone. This is likely our final farewell. If not, for the soul-summoning ritual when you were 8, we would never have met, let alone become grandfather and grandson." He said that the ritual back then was not meant to summon my soul back. It was meant to summon me here. As for everything before the age of 8, he couldn't tell me, not because he refused to, but because even he didn't know. Fate had brought me to take over the body of his real grandson, the true Lee-er. He left me with 3 rules I must remember for the rest of my life. 1. Leave the village and head south. Do not stop until you meet a woman dressed in black who speaks to you. 2. The skills he taught me may only be used after meeting a woman with the surname Huang. 3. Never, under any circumstances, tell fortunes for someone with the surname Ma. I clenched the letter tightly. So everything had begun with that dream all those years ago. The next day, I packed my belongings and set out alone toward the south. 3 days later, in the small town of Hangzhou, just as I stepped out of the train station, a woman dressed in black smiled and asked me, "Hey kid, looking for a place to stay?" I knew I had arrived at the right place. Hangzhou was known as the 9 Dragons. Returning to the lair, a geomantic formation where 3 of the dragon veins had already been severed, making the local fortune twisted and dangerous. There, I reunited with Ye Tingting, an old classmate who helped me when I was at my most desperate. And there, I met Huang Yiyi. The moment I saw her, I noticed black aura coiling around her body, a sign of a catastrophic calamity looming over her household. Someone surnamed Huang had finally appeared. Huang Yi's father, Huang Sihai, was suffering from advanced liver cancer that progressed abnormally fast, accompanied by recurring bizarre dreams. I stabilized his soul using chicken blood, cinnabar, and silver needles. He woke up, but that was only the beginning. After examining his family's ancestral burial site, I discovered a rare and vicious geomantic formation, the red toad severing the bloodline array. We opened the coffin. Inside, a 3-legged red toad sat motionless. If it wasn't dealt with, the Wang family would face extinction. I didn't kill it. Instead, I used a guiding ritual to send it away. The toad leapt out of the grave. The geomantic formation collapsed. The Huang family escaped disaster, and I officially stepped onto the path of this profession. But I knew very well, once a geomantic array is broken, the one who set it will suffer backlash, and sooner or later, he would come looking for me. The dragon dream from years ago, the missing soul, my fate, had only just begun. Once a geomantic formation is broken, the one who set it will inevitably suffer backlash. That is the law. No punishment is needed. Heaven and earth collect their debts in their own way. That night, after leaving the Huang household, I returned to my old rented room. The moment I stepped inside, an intense sense of unease rose in my chest. It wasn't fear, it was the feeling of being watched, as if something were observing me from afar. I knew it wasn't a human presence. It was Qi, a chaotic surge of yin energy, carrying a faint, fishy stench of blood and grave soil. The one who had set the red toad formation had already been struck by backlash, and he was looking for me. The next afternoon at 4:30 p.m., my phone vibrated, an unknown number. The moment I answered, a low, hoarse male voice came through, cold, abrasive, like metal, scraping against stone. "Was it you? Who destroyed my feng shui array?" My heart tightened slightly, not from fear, but from the confirmation that my guess had been correct. "I did," I replied bluntly, "but it was a severing formation. You never should have used it." A soft chuckle came from the other end. The laugh was quiet, yet it sent a chill sliding down my spine. Interesting. A brat not even 20, yet daring to lecture me on principles. He paused, then continued. 6 o'clock, Longfeng Alley, come alone. The call ended. Staring at the dark screen, I was perfectly clear about one thing. This wasn't a meeting to talk. It was a meeting to decide life and death. At exactly 6, I arrived at Longfeng Alley. Inside the eatery, near the window, sat a man dressed in black, a baseball cap pulled low to obscure most of his face. Black qi swirled densely around him, so thick it made my scalp prickle. As I approached, he lifted his head. His face was deathly pale, completely devoid of color. The way he looked at me didn't resemble a living person's gaze, but rather the eyes of a corpse newly awakened. "Sit," he said, pointing to the chair across from him. I sat down. "Do you know what the red toad formation is?" he asked. "I do," I answered. "A heretical array that trades blessings for fate, using the descendant's fortune to nourish the living." He burst out laughing. "Then do you know that I didn't set it for money?" I met his gaze directly. "For revenge." The smile on his face froze. His name was Chung Yin. 30 years ago, he had once been a practitioner of feng shui himself, not a fraud, but someone with real skill. But his master, in a struggle for reputation, had been accidentally pushed forward by the Huang family at the time to take responsibility for a deadly suppression ritual. The ritual failed, and his master died a gruesome death. The one who ultimately benefited was the Huang family. "I didn't want to kill them," Chung Yin said, his voice trembling. "I only wanted them to have no heirs." "You took the wrong path," I said calmly. "The ones who deserved to die are gone. The innocent were the ones who paid the price." He stared at me for a long moment, then suddenly changed his tone. "Help them and I'll give you 5 million. Walk away from this." I shook my head. "This isn't about money." The instant I finished speaking, Chung Yin suddenly grabbed my wrist. In that moment, a terrifying cold surged into my meridians. But before I could react, his eyes flew wide open. He stiffened, then collapsed heavily to the floor. The restaurant erupted into chaos. Staff screamed. An ambulance was called, but it was already too late. When the police arrived, I was taken to the station to give a statement. A middle-aged officer placed the case file on the table and fixed me with a sharp gaze. "The autopsy shows," he said slowly, "that the man died 12 hours ago." I froze. 12 hours. Then what was it that had been sitting across from me? The officer stared at me intently. "Are you certain everything you said is true?" I nodded. In my mind, a chilling realization slowly took shape. Chung Yin had already been dead before he called me. What I encountered was not a living person, but a corpse borrowing life, forcibly dragged back by resentment, trying to pull me down with it. By the time I left the station, it was already late at night. The night wind brushed past me, and I suddenly remembered the dragon dream from when I was 8 years old. The headless dragon, the black smoke pouring forth. In that moment, I understood something. Chung Yin was not the final hand behind this. He was only a pawn. A dead man could never have set up a complete red toad severing array on his own. There had to be someone else, hidden in the shadows, guiding him, lending him techniques, lending him life. And that person might very well be the reason I lost a soul all those years ago. I lifted my head and looked at the night sky. In my heart, I knew with absolute clarity, this game, from the dragon dream to the red toad formation to Chung Yin, was leading me toward a truth far greater than I had imagined. And this time, it was no longer the feng shui of a single family, but the feng shui of my own destiny.